Some of you have been asking about this high idle kit I've been making for my 24 valve Cummins here. So I'd run over quick on how the thing works. Kind of what's behind it. I'm not sure for newer vehicles. I know it was a standard programming in the ECM for 98 to 02 24 valve Cummins with the VP44 injection pump. There was a service bolt initiated as this 24 valve head came out. They flowed more air and ran cooler combustion temperatures, allowing tar and gum to build up on the valves and sticking them and bending your push rods. Obviously it wasn't a real common thing because mine's got over 230,000 miles on it and it never had the high idle enabled until I enabled it myself. Basically just a little bit what we got going on under the hood here. We got our harness for the high idle coming around, comes up and taps into our ECT sensor up here, engine coolant temp. And the other one goes around back and down in and taps in to your IAT sensor, intake air temperature. And then they run down and through a hole in your firewall. Manual transmission, you have to drill a hole. Automatic transmission has a access hole where your clutch master cylinder would normally be. Then you come in, run it in up under and up through the pillar here. Running around up in to our switch bank. Got some accessory switches over here for other shit. But here's we got our, as you can see, top three switches, or all three switches need to be up for high idle, 1200 RPM. These two on the right down for normal, and the one on the left down for 3-cylinder. It does not matter the position of that switch unless the high idle switches over here are up. So basically just you run down here, let it run. It will not enable on its own, being as I had just been driving it and it's a pretty nice day out. I'll run it up here and we'll enable. Or this one up on 3 first so you can see the high idle, and then we'll hit it down to 3 cylinders. You can see our coolant temp drop. Mine runs for about a minute for the high idle to kick in, and then sometimes it can take up to 3 or 4 minutes depending on temperature outside and whatnot. Your grid heater warms up your intake air, so your IAT sensor for the first few minutes or seconds is going to see a nice warm air temperature. But once it starts getting that cold air sucking in, it'll see it and then it'll kick in, which gives you the 2-3 minute delay. Kind of waiting for it. The requirements for high idle to enable is 32 degrees intake temperature and below, and 140 degrees water temp and below will cause high idle to enable automatically. And if the intake temperature is below 30 or 15 degrees, 3-cylinder mode will kick in. And you can see our RPM is climbing, not touching the gas. Now if you depress the service brake, touch the accelerator, or if the senses any type of forward or backward movement, it will disable high idle. And I have 5600 transmission, 6-speed, so it doesn't have the automatic. But if you move your park lever from park or neutral, it will disable. It must be in park or neutral for it to enable. And once it is disabled, it will not re-enable until you do a key cycle on-off, and it will enable again. See, we're revving up and we're holding 1200 RPM. Now we'll go up here and hit our 3-cylinder. And you hear it change right away. It drops into 3-cylinder mode. It just gives an increased load, increased exhaust temperatures, causing it to warm up faster. of sounds like a little bit of a mess. It's kind of a normal sound you'll hear out of them. Now functions, they stay enabled even with switches off. Unless you turn everything down and it senses that warmer water temperature, it'll kick out. See our water temp gauge going back up. Basically what we have behind here on our switches is this switch having two resistors for your different intake air temperatures. A more resistance, I believe, is warmer temperature. I do not remember. It just basically, your sensor gets a signal voltage, and whatever the computer sees return tells it what the temperature is. So basically you're restricting voltage, so it's telling it colder temp even though it's actually warm, and it just bypasses your sensor. There's it's a six post 3-position switch, on off on. This is called a dual position dual throw DP/DT switch. A Radio Shack, like $4. They're that expensive. Same for resistors, they're like 200 pack for $5. And then the wire and your connectors. There's a website on the internet that sells OEM connectors to plug directly into your sensor and then your harness going back to the ECM, so you do not have to cut wires if you don't want to. I ordered the connector kits. Sturtevant's local auto parts here has the ECM side connectors for plugging into the sensor, and then I actually found a John Deere egg connector to plug into the ECM side, so I didn't have to order the connectors, but I wanted to make sure everything was right, so I did, and then I used them. But to get it temporary fixed when I was trying to get it working, that worked good for messing around with it. The programming for high idle came factory enabled on or factory disabled. There's a factory option in the 24 valve ECM, but for some reason they put it in there and didn't enable it. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but you can obviously go to your dealer and have them enable it, or I was told a Smarty programmer will enable it, but after 2 unsuccessful downloads with a Smarty without it enabling on its own, I found access to a DRB tool for free and enabled it myself. It's easy. You just go into your DRB, hit scan, go into your engine, and go to miscellaneous engine options, and right there it says 3-cylinder idle. You open that up and hit enable button, and you have it. My instructor is part-time at Chrysler dealer. He warned me that disconnecting the battery cables may disable it again, being as it's not a flash, it was just a turn on in the computer. But I did do a ECM, or I disconnected all my battery power and then hooked everything back up, and it did still function. I'm not sure if being disconnected over a period of time would disable it, but we'll find out when that happens. So that's basically what the high idle is. It'll get your engine up to warm operating temp. I hear a lot of guys say within 10 minutes. I haven't had it long enough or in cold enough weather to have good experience with it, so that's kind of basically what it is.